Welcome to the Road to Reinvention. My name is Sherrell Dorsey, and today I have an incredible special guest, a friend, but also an incredible leader in the space of mental health and wellness, Rwenshaun Miller. Rwenshaun is a licensed professional therapist, a speaker, an award-winning social entrepreneur, and his personal journey of being diagnosed with bipolar disorder led to the founding of Eustress, Inc., a nonprofit that focuses on raising mental health awareness through conversation and activities to break the stigma associated with mental illness in Black and Brown communities. Rwenshaun is the recipient of the American Psychiatric Association Foundation Award for Advancing Minority Mental Health and the South by Southwest Community Service Award. He has also been featured in the Huffington Post, Blavity, Bustle, Men's Health, and more. Rwenshaun is the executive producer of the short film Black Friday and the author of Injured Reserve, a Black man's playbook to manage being sidelined by mental illness. I'm really excited about today's conversation, so we're going to just dive right in. So, Sean, your work has so much to do with this idea around stigma, especially in the Black and Brown community, where we know these conversations aren't really happening, especially around mental health. So talk to me about how these stigmas really prevent us from being the best version of ourselves.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's starting off is this stigma allows us to hide in shells. And we really don't know who we truly are because we try to live up to certain expectations when it comes down to what our families want us to do, what our friends want us to do, and what society puts us in boxes.
Yeah.
So I think that has a lot to do with it. But then also the stigma, especially surrounding mental health and mental illness, it allows people to lie to themselves about what they really have going on.
Yeah. Yeah. What makes you, or what are the ideas around that hiding and those societal pressures? And because even like when I look at social media, right, it's like everyone's living this glamorous life, everyone's traveling, everyone's got 55 side hustles and, get in the bag, speaking on panels and stages. And it seems like it's so glossy. And we have sort of created this archetype of ourselves that is very well polished. And then you have these challenges of folks who now kind of come out and are talking about suicidal thoughts, and you think, oh my gosh, these people have everything in the world. Right. And yet, like, where does this depression come from? Like, where does this unhappiness come from? Like, what divorce, all of these kinds of things. Like how does even just that aspect, like, how is that shape that keeps us in hiding?
Well, one of the things I think, we post our highlight reels. Yeah. So also for me as a clinician, I see both sides though. So you have one extreme. So you got people that's always down, always depressed, and always posting negative things. But then you got the people that want to post their highlight reels. Yeah. And for the people that post their highlight reels, they don't want to show themselves as human. And a lot of times when you have that mask and you have that different personas and all of those particular things, like, people are afraid to let people know, man, I have down days. Yeah. Every day is not the greatest. I'm not always on a trip. Who can afford to always be on a trip? Or they don't see the hustle that comes behind all of those particular things. Me and you, like, we've been at this for a while.
Yeah, I was just telling my producer, Jess, about how, like, early on, we would literally have like these brainstorming ideation sessions, years ago, like in my office, whiteboarding. Yep. And it's like nothing is an overnight success.
Nothing at all.
At the end of the day. But for some reason, like, we are sort of conditioned to believe like, hey, if I build up my following, if I show all the pretty, fancy, sexy things, then this will equate to success. And then as I arrive at success, like, the happier I'll become. And that's just really not what ends up taking place.
And so it's interesting that you put it that way. So let's even look at it from mental wellness. A lot of people think that, if I take this pill or if I go to therapy, I'll be automatically feel better. No, it takes work.
Wait, because I've been in therapy for years. And at some point you're like, wait, I'm not fixed yet. When do I arrive at this, like, oh, this is done versus this is an ongoing journey?
But when do you stop living?
I mean, I don't know how to answer that.
Life be life, yo.
Lives. Even when, like, just when you think that you have overcome, and whatever that context means, lives.
Right.
You know, someone dies, right?
Right.
You know, an opportunity that you were banking on is now no longer an opportunity, and you have to reshuffle, or you got an employee that you have to let go of that's no longer performing, right? Or we're looking now at the economic infrastructure, right? You thought, oh, I got this nice 6-figure job plus the stock options plus all these things, and like I'm setting up my life based on this one rooted opportunity.
Oh yeah, that just
and now,
to me.
right. I mean, it's real talk, right? Right. It's real talk. And yet, like, when those things happen and they knock you off center, it's like having to go back into those fundamentals around the wellness component. And yeah, I think that for so many of us, we think, okay, yeah, I'm doing the yoga, I'm taking the hot baths, I'm going on the trips, I am in therapy, I'm doing all the other fancy trendy things, you know, I have the coach. And then you feel like I need a whole super team of superheroes to keep me together, or I will crack.
Right. But also think about it like this. Do you ever stop going to the doctor?
No. Well, you shouldn't.
So why should you? So even when people come to me as for my clients, I'm like, I might not have to see you every week. Yeah. But I at least need to check in with you and know what's going on. So even for myself, when I go to my therapist, right now I'm going to my therapist once a month. But, you know, when I was going through certain trials and tribulations, I had to see her every week. Yeah. I was like, yo, I need to get on your schedule. Yeah. So understanding that, you know, having that resource and that support system in that manner, it never goes away.
And let's like really, to use like a tech term, let's double click on that. Let's double click on this term here. So much of your story and your work is embedded in your own journey. Your own challenges with mental health. And when we first met, I think we had like a phone call, and you told me your whole life story, and I was like, whoa, I just met this dude, right? And like I think I was like writing a story, about your journey, and it was like so vulnerable, and you not only have publicly shared your story, but your entire profession is rooted on helping other folks, which is so interesting because like we see the Brene Browns of the world. Yeah. We have like women who naturally are open, right? And talking about mental health and wellness, but rarely do we see Black men in this space, especially as like licensed clinicians. And so you're somewhat of an anomaly in many ways. Like you're also from the South, right? Like from the deep South. Yes. Right? Like y'all just got traffic lights. I know. I'm sorry.
But no, we legit only have one in my town.
That's what I'm seeing. Yeah, like, listen.
Like the nearest Walmart is like 30 minutes away.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. But all of these things that culturally are very anti telling your business in the streets. Facts. Or relying on tools like therapy when maybe it might have been you just got to pray about it. You got to go to the revival and, you know, semi-exorcism and the demons will come out. Right, holy water. Right, like stuff. Into the conversation that we had when we first met around some of your challenges finding out in college. And so I want you to kind of share a little bit about that and like why you decided not only, like, I'm not going to allow this diagnosis to determine what I can't do, but I'm actually going to turn it into like this superpower that has defined your life purpose. You got to share your story with us.
and we're not going to talk about it from a superpower standpoint like Kanye does, because
right.
That's a little different. But
that is so far. That is so far.
But I think one of the things you mentioned in my diagnosis. So I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder with psychotic features back in 2006. Yeah. I was a sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill, and I received that diagnosis while I was in Duke Medical Center in their psychiatric ward. My family actually drugged me to the hospital. And of course, against my will, and I ended up punching a nurse when I got to the hospital. So they put me in restraints and put me in a padded room. And that was something that was very scary for me because the things that we normally see on TV about psychiatric wards, about mental health and all of those things, like they're terrifying.
Yeah.
Those are part of horror movies. And so coming up from rural North Carolina, Bertie County, like I said, we don't have much there.
You got a Walmart?
No, we just don't have a Walmart in our county, in the entire county.
We'll start an advocacy group.
But so like growing up, I was the man where I came from because I played sports, played football, ran track and basketball, but then also I was a scholar. So I ended up going to Chapel Hill on an academic scholarship.
Not a football scholarship.
No, but then walked on to the football team and the track team once I got there.
Gotcha.
So I'm juggling all of these things. And then going into my sophomore year, I caught a helmet to my knee. And so...
Wait, I grew up in theater and computers.
Yeah.
What does a helmet to your knee mean? Because I'm not a sports person. You're going to have to back that up.
All right. So I'm on the practice field and, we're running a play and another guy who on the opposing side of the field put his helmet directly into this actual knee. And so it blew out my knee.
Whew.
Yeah. So I had to have surgery and all of those things. But then on top of that, I wasn't doing well in school.
Okay.
Either. So that transition from a predominantly Black community to PWI and trying to understand how to navigate those spaces, coming from a small town, the school is larger than the population in my entire county.
Right.
So trying to navigate those things, it was a struggle.
Yeah. So you're dealing with like culture shock. You're out of sort of a safe environment that you know very well, being thrust into something you have to relearn from the ground up.
Right. And then you got to put on so many different masks in those spaces.
Okay.
And you behind the 8 ball because you're trying to catch up on stuff. Because my first chemistry class, it was like they started teaching stuff to say, oh, you're supposed to learn this other stuff in high school. I didn't learn that.
Right.
Because we were behind.
Yeah.
So ended up, after that surgery, I sat in my room. I went through a period where I didn't sleep for about 2 weeks, started to hear voices, but then also lost about 25 pounds over a matter of 6 weeks. And then luckily for me, I'm an only child and I talk to my mom every day and she could just tell something that was wrong in my voice.
Yeah.
And when she heard that, she sent my cousin to come check in on me and took me out of the room. And that's how I ended up in the hospital. But receiving that diagnosis while in the hospital, honestly, when I first got it, I was like, I don't believe nothing you're saying. Because all of the doctors in there, they were white. Nobody in there looked like me at all. So, and then we're taught to not trust medical professionals, especially medical professionals that don't look like me.
And how old were you at this age?
19.
Okay. So this is a whole different world now. You're already in a new world. Right. And now there's this entire conversation that's happening.
You introduce this new thing. And then I'm looking out at my family and they're crying. I'm like, y'all crying, but y'all the one brought me here.
Right. So, I didn't ask for y'all to come.
Right. But then also they're telling me, oh, you need to be on meds and you need to go to therapy and you can't go back to school because that's a stressor for you at the moment. I was like, I just want to get out of the hospital.
Yeah. How long were you there for?
I was there for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was one of my lowest moments in my life because my identity was so wrapped up in being a man and so wrapped up in being an athlete and wrapped up in being a scholar. All of this has changed now. Yeah. So now I'm in a psychiatric ward. So now I'm calling myself crazy. And I'm no longer who I used to be. And now I can't go back to school, but I don't want to go back home because people go ask, why are you home? And I don't want them in my business.
So there was no safe space anywhere for you at that time?
Not at that time.
Yeah.
Because, that's a lot to deal with. That's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
Ended up in Charlotte, though, because my uncle lived there. And I got connected with a doctor, Dr. Kendall Jasper. And that was one of the defining moments for me in my career, but then also in my own health. Yeah. Because he was a Black male. But then also he looked like me. He dressed like me. He talked like me. When I first went into his office, he dapped me up. I was like, bro, you sure you a doctor? Because we don't see stuff like that. Let me see your credentials. Right. Like we used to see in a white coat and, button up.
Very clinical, very sterile.
Right.
Yeah.
He had on a t-shirt, some basketball shorts and J's.
Okay.
So talking with him, ended up getting the treatment that I needed to get. But then also I wanted to go back to school. And when I got back to school, my symptoms ended up coming back because I stopped my treatment. I stopped my treatment because of the fact that I thought that I was cured. I didn't know that this was something that I lived with for the rest of my life.
That lifelong, well, you were alluding to that earlier.
Yeah.
Like you don't stop living. That actually just like hit me hard when you said that. It's like, well, how long are you gonna be living? Because you have to do continuous care. It is a journey, and as you say, it becomes part of your life now. It's a lifestyle. It's not a one time and be done. Right. It's a continuous journey.
Especially if you don't want to go back in crisis mode. So
that's a whole word.
Yeah. That's a whole word. You have to do your due diligence to make sure that you don't end up back to where you don't want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It becomes a science to understanding yourself, but then understanding the things that you need and certain things you need to adjust.
And over time, as I can imagine, because we become different people throughout this process. And you talk so much about the transformation and, from being in the hospital to now kind of readjusting back into society as someone who had this identity that you built up that was probably a part of you and then became the mask you had to wear because that was the persona that you kind of came in with. Adjusting to these new spaces again, and now readjusting and reinventing through, I have this diagnosis, I have this treatment plan, and now that shell has transformed, and now I have to figure out where I am in this shell. But
the thing about it was, even I had to figure out what I am in this shell, but nobody else knew that I had this diagnosis.
Right, because how do you talk about it? Whether you have a diagnosis or not, it's hard to say, even when, and you talked about, speaking to your mom. I remember just days where, I'm 3,000 miles away from my family and I'm going through the highs and the lows of life, be it graduating in the heart of a recession to, losing my first job out of college to I have no idea what to do now that I'm out of this relationship or whatever it was. And that phone call, that mom, I don't know why they always know, but that mom phone call that comes in this what's wrong?
Right.
What's going on? Right. But you can't even put the words together, the language together.
Because we're not given the language.
Right. Right. There is no language outside of crazy.
Right.
Right. Crazy, or like you said, that the horror film of, and then crazy looks like white walls, restraints, medication, some kind of formed dance mob with George Clinton. Right. Remember from Good Burger? It was all the crazy people dancing Thriller.
Or in our communities, it looks like the homeless people.
Right.
Or people that are strung out on drugs or these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the, auntie that's somebody is that's just, we don't fool with them too much.
Right.
Right.
But why not?
Yeah.
So understanding all of those particular things, and that's who I am internally now, but no one knew about what was going on. So I still had to put that mask on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then even then, so with my family, with them taking me to the hospital and knowing my diagnosis and all of those things, it still was tough for me to talk to them about because I didn't want them to worry.
So now it becomes protection. So once again, not a ton of safe space because you have to worry about other people's feelings.
Yeah, because you're worried about other people and you want to protect them from your own stuff, and then it's only building on to what you're doing.
But that's such a tremendous weight. I think especially from a leadership perspective. And I also want to dive into how you did overcome some of the stigma to then turn it into creating safe spaces for others.
Definitely.
But even the weight on that, because as a therapist, an invisible therapist at that, I'm sure your DMs are
bruh,
hey, could I get a session? And it's no, because I have 25,000 followers. I can't give you all a session.
Right. Right.
So now you're trying to find safe spaces, but your concern is not necessarily your wellness, but the wellness of other people, particularly your family, who's of course going to be concerned about you, who loves you deeply, but you want to make sure that they feel like you're going to be good. A lot of us do that.
All of us do it to a certain degree. We have, so what really got to the point where for me in my journey is once I went back to school and I stopped my treatment and the symptoms started back heavy, I went through my high highs and my low lows, and I attempted suicide 3 times.
remember you mentioning that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first 2 times I tried to die by suicide by overdosing on pills. And then the last time I put a gun in my head and pulled the trigger and it jammed on me. Mm. For me, that was my wake-up call to understanding that I needed to take my wellness more seriously. Mm-hmm. It's not by chance that I will get better. I needed to learn myself, like, just like I go study for a test or something like that. I needed to really dig into who Rwenshaun Lamar Miller is.
Yeah.
And understanding what ticks. And I think, so going back to your initial question about the stigma, I had to learn, what did bipolar disorder look like for me? Mm-hmm. Because of the fact of when the doctor told me, they just gave me some general stuff, told me I needed to do these things, and that's it. Okay, I needed to take that and do some more research.
Mm-hmm. What does your continuum of care actually look like?
Right.
Yeah. But I wanna put a pin because the language and the challenges around suicide, and we've seen or witnessed so many public, folks who have, again, seemingly everything was going well. It looked like their lives were great. Just wanting to honor like the life of Twitch and his family and friends and a lot of folks who I knew who knew him. And I think it always shocks us, right? I think it always shocks us. And I think that's really heavy that you had those experiences. And at the time, was that when you had thought you were cured because of the medication, and then you realized I need to get back in this game?
Yeah. So when I thought I was cured, and I was like, yo, I for one, I was able to hide it, and then I could jump back into this game. I can go back and being myself. I can still be this person that people looked up to and all of these things, and still uphold the standard of what people put on me.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, I don't need this treatment and stuff. I'm going to just go ahead and just do it.
Do me.
Yeah. Whether I go home every day and cry, or, days that I can't even get out of the bed and don't even want to see the sunlight, when I step out, I'm going to step out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I can't show y'all none of that stuff.
Yeah. But that's still the shell that you're presenting to the world.
Right.
Right. I also just want to also reference something that I learned from you around the conversation around suicide. And I think that we have to really acknowledge that no matter how great we are, no matter what we've achieved, education-wise, business-wise, we could have raised $100 million in venture capital. And, like you said, you're the man, you're the woman, you're on top of the game industry-wise. And yet we still see these very drastic and dramatic things that happen. And a few years ago, you tweeted about how the language, you broke down the etymology of this idea of committed suicide, because it was illegal back in the day to commit suicide. Like, I don't understand how that actually works. And every time someone uses that term committed versus died by suicide, that moment I saw that tweet, I completely changed my language on that. Like, they died by suicide. Yeah. Because it almost victimizes the victim completely. And language, as we know, it matters. And now that we're starting to learn the language of wellness, I think that part of the stigma that we were speaking about earlier is starting to transform and transition. Now, and maybe in some artificial ways, I think we're all in this soft life, wellness, what have you, without like a lot of depth.
But what does that look like?
But what does that actually look like when we do change and alter the language, as we are reinventing terminology, as we're reinventing stigma, and then in that case, like reinventing ourselves. So I want to dive into how you went from, okay, I'm cured, to, okay, maybe not, into I have to develop a continuous care plan for myself. And now I feel, and I don't want to say strong enough, because it assumes that you're not strong if you're struggling with wellness or health issues.
I'll say comfortable.
Comfortable. Okay. much more comfortable around sharing your story and then empowering yourself and your community based on your story. Because I wonder, had these things from going into school, being in an uncomfortable environment, receiving your diagnosis, like I wonder if none of those things happened to you, Rwenshaun Miller, would we have any of the things that you've built and created, right? Like it became such a big part of your story. So I want to dive into that. You reinvented your story and used it as a platform and as a catalyst to help other people see themselves in you, but more important, be able to start opening up and take ownership of their own narrative around their wellness, whether there was a diagnosis or not, but knowing that like, hey, I need to have conversations. I need to be in therapy. I may need medication. I may need, whatever it is. Like talk to me about all of that.
Whew. You talk about reinventing. So if I look at it from that standpoint, I had to reinvent my mask. Because the mask that I was wearing put me in restraints. Literally and figuratively. right. But and I wasn't meant to be in a box. I don't think none of us are.
Yeah.
And so as I got to learn myself more and I started to really understand what wellness and healing and what living for me looked like, I started to see so many people around me that were suffering. I was able to pick up on those little signs where individuals are not, they're smiling, but you can tell they're not happy. Or they're smoking and you seeing they chain smoking, or they drinking a lot.
Waking and baking.
Right, all of these things. Because I was that person.
Okay.
So to your point, all of these things, all of my experiences allowed me to combine my book knowledge with what I had experienced and what life has presented to me to be able to help other people.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people don't feel seen. And being seen doesn't always mean, oh, tell me your whole life story. It could be when you were in school, sending you a card. Or just check, like, yo, I know you in school, just checking in on you.
Yeah.
It could be something small like that. And then also for me, when I decided to go get I wanted to be a therapist because I understand that we don't have enough Black male therapists, for one. We don't have enough therapists in general. But
right, I think the data was like less than 4% of all therapists in general are folks of color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I need to do something about that. But then also when I was in my master's program, they're teaching me stuff. I'm like, how is this gonna work when I go to the hood and I'm sitting on the couch trying to do therapy with an 8-year-old, 4-year-old brother running around, mom in there cooking, and then you got, his little sister trying to beat him over the head.
Right.
Where's the cultural aspect to it? So when I'm asking my teachers these questions, they don't have any answers. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna take what you give me, but then I'm gonna make it fit to what I know needs to be happening.
And your approaches have been pretty unconventional because it's not just like physically showing up on a sofa.
I rarely see people on the sofa.
Right. So where do you take your clients or your patients?
So a lot of times, man, we may be in the park. We'll go to the gym. I work out with a couple of my clients. We go shoot basketball. I go to their house, you know what I'm saying? So where they're actually comfortable, because therapy is hard. We're not used to going in and having an objective person coming in and just listening to all of our problems. So and then also for me, understanding from a male standpoint, I can't have a dude come sit on my couch. Oh, so tell me about your day. He'll be looking at me like, I ain't got nothing for you, bro.
Okay.
So I need to get them active. I need to get them, engaged so they don't feel like all of the pressure is on them. So even playing video games with some of my kids And I can play video games with them via the internet now, you know? So and then COVID was a blessing in disguise because it created an opportunity for a lot of people to try therapy virtually and see what works for them and see what it actually looks like.
A little less intimidating.
Very less intimidating.
Yeah. And I've done both. I've done the going to a physical location every week into virtual, you know, and sometimes you need either or.
Right.
You know, sometimes you need that human connection. You got to sit across from someone. You got to look somebody in the eyes.
Right.
And sometimes you're like, my life is busy, but I know this is important.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, all of our lives are busy. And then the way our society is set up, you working all day. And then if you got kids, when you getting off, you taking care of them. So when are you going to have time to go do therapy or go talk to somebody? That's why it keeps getting pushed to the back burner.
Yeah. I love that video games is a portal.
Oh, yeah.
A workout as a portal. I think especially for men.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, women, sometimes we default to, you know, we have a lot of friends. We have a lot of girlfriends. Like there's always kind of someone who you can, you know, connect with that is going to be a listening ear. But I think statistically, men have fewer of those closer bonds. And I know one of the things that you do as well is annually you and your friends, your line brothers, do a trip as well. And it's a check-in that y'all have been doing for a while now.
This will be year 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the way we set it up is we leave Wednesday to Tuesday of Labor Day. The first couple of days is us just checking in. It's not just about partying and everything. We want to make sure that where are you sitting at in life? What are your goals? And then also, how can we fit into those goals? How can we support you? What hardships have you had? What wins are you having? You know, all of those particular things. So us being very intentional about that stuff. Yeah.
And what's interesting too is, you know, when I was still in Charlotte and we were doing our like Monday morning stand-up meetings, we talked so much about all the things we wanted to accomplish. And so many of those things have happened. And I remember you were talking about having an outpatient center and you recently actually opened one in your hometown. Like, let's talk about how all these things happen amid so many of the transformative, you know, highs and lows of not just a pandemic, but then also, you know, running your own clinic. You've been, of course, seeing clients for years, but expanding your practice, joining a tech company and then unjoining a tech company once a new person took over and decided to change priorities.
Right.
But that entire process, because that was almost another transformative, you know, series of events that happened and took root. But I want to dive a little bit more into your continuous building of these spaces and the success that comes with it, but then also I think maybe the ways in which you have to double down on your care overall as you're building these like incredible things and doing great work, right? Because a lot of times we love our work. We love what we're doing. We love who we're helping, but that does take a lot out of you. And then you have to start placing or delegating or what have you in order to expand and to scale at the same time. So maybe you can talk about your journey in that.
Man, those days that in your office, boy, on the whiteboard sessions.
Listen.
So I think for me is as I learned myself and started to build myself internally, that's what allowed me to build outwardly. And me being grounded in who I am, what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, but then also not being afraid to pivot when I needed to. Me being strict about my regimen, me being understanding the supports that I need to have around me, and then also telling them what I need. And then, you know, and holding them accountable, but then also being accountable myself. Just to see, you know, right now with my private practice, I have 9 therapists that work with me. We have 2 interns. And then also as I help with leading them, it's not just about what can they do for the company, but I invest in them. What else do you want to do? So I have those same brainstorming sessions that we used to have. I do those with my staff too. Because like, if you don't want to work with me, I don't want you to work for me all your life. If you want to, cool. But also I need to know what else you're working towards. So being able to invest in people can take you a very long way, because again, I think people are not being seen in so many different ways. And then that translates into me helping teach them certain ways that I do my practice. Because we don't learn that in school.
No. We playing Call of Duty with our patients.
Right.
That's not in the textbook.
So like being able to do that, you know, and teach them those ways. But then also, I mean, it's been a beautiful thing just to see the growth, but then also to see my family that took me to the hospital and see them so engaged in the work that I do now.
Wait, because didn't your mom work for you for a bit?
She's working for me now.
She's still working for you?
Yeah, she's the one running the office in Bertie.
I just remember when you were like posting about her taking a lunch break to go get her hair done.
Right. I'm like, bruh.
You're like, Ma, we doing some real work.
Right. But like, yo, she's probably one of my biggest supporters.
Yeah.
But then also like, I could see it give her life. And then like...
Wait, because like, did the conversations in your family also change as you've like been able to talk about mental health and well-being and checking in? Okay.
Yes, completely shifted. But then not even just for my younger cousins and them, but then also for the older generations. Yeah. And sometimes I got to check them because they want me to be their therapist. I'll be like, nah, I can't do it. But I'll point you in the right direction, you know. Good. But at least they're wanting to talk about these things and discuss them. We talk about different traumas and stuff that went on, and, you know, people releasing some of that stuff and then being
processing for the first time. Yeah. Well, then you were also doing, even just like long ago, I don't know what year this is for Eustress.
This will be, so we started in 2013.
Because you were doing mental health walks.
Yeah, still doing them.
Yeah. And you were doing them in your hometown to bring awareness.
Yeah. I did them in my hometown, did them in Charlotte and in Chapel Hill. So my 3 homes. Yeah. Yeah. And going back to some of the unconventional methods, also coloring, like adult coloring sessions. That's my thing.
Right. Which is so, like, it's actually a lot of fun. Yeah. But getting into a room with a bunch of adults, like coloring books, pencils.
Hey, look, I'm gonna pause you. So the very first coloring night happened because of Sherrell.
I just had a space.
But we needed a space.
Yes. And it was so much fun.
It was so dope.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. It was like, you know how like game night is enthusiastic for like adults, but it was legit like going back to the fundamentals of just having fun. Right? Because all this stuff can be heavy and serious. Right. And it was like, we're just coming to color and have conversation and build community.
Yep. And that's what it's really about. And then, like you said, a lot of this stuff is really built off of my own journey. I personally color. Yeah. I personally journal. Yeah. Meditate. I do yoga, all of these things. So I incorporate that into my practices and teaching people how to do these things. It's not something that I read out of a book. It's not something that, you know, is a fad for me. No, this is my lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the important part, is the lifestyle and looking at ourselves holistically. And you talked a lot about being seen. Yeah. And I've always struggled with that aspect of what does it mean to be seen. People talk about bringing your full self, and it's like, you don't want my full self. Right. Like, you don't want me to actually say what I want to say. Right. Like, I gotta pull that back a little bit. Or to live the mood that I'm feeling for the day. But there is an aspect of, how do I allow my family to see me? How do I allow my team to see me as well? Because there are a lot of stressors as a boss, whether you are an entrepreneur or a manager. And you spoke about, you know, the weight on your shoulders, and your clients, you know, are like, look, I won't sit around and just tell you, but like, how's my day? Like, what kind of question is this? Right. Like, it's a struggle. It's a pandemic. Like, eggs are expensive. Like, what do you want me to say? You know, but this idea that like, I'm a fully fledged person and I deal with the highs and the lows of life in the world. And yet every day I get up and I try again. And that lifestyle aspect, that integration of, this is what my wellness looks like, and there are no negotiables around that aspect, and teaching those boundaries to people as well. because when we set up our own boundaries, it also teaches other people to set up their own boundaries.
True.
Like my team, like I have like my therapy on Mondays, and then I have rest periods and I have blocks. And I started to notice like my team is like rest period, rest block, lunch.
Love it.
Right? Because it's easy, especially when you're working remote, to just be around the clock and accessible. And I'm like, if you are hitting me on Slack and you see it's my rest period, like do not expect a response right then.
Right.
But being able to establish those boundaries because you are a whole person and being able to teach that to others and to show up is so transformative for us as we're starting to build. I want to just ask you our last question as we end our conversation around this idea of like, what does reinvention look like, you know, to you? It's happened for you on so many levels, in so many ways. But to our audience and to our listeners and to our viewers, you know, what does it mean to reinvent yourself?
Whew. For me, reinventing myself started with honesty with myself. Because it wasn't more so of having to pivot in the lens of career or anything like that. It was more so of me truly learning who is Rwenshaun. Outside of other expectations, outside of other people's, what they wanted me to do or anything like that. No, what truly brings me joy and happiness. And then being able to live in that particular space, which brought me peace. And then also understanding if I'm not hurting anybody, rock out.
I love that. But what about for those of us who are still afraid? Because all that sounds great. Like there's a world of peace and joy and happiness and coloring books galore, right?
Yeah.
But what about the fear, that first step, that first conversation you may have to have with your family who loves you but is afraid, right? Who's gonna give you this advice to maybe you gotta stay in this because you don't know when the next opportunity gonna come. You know, some of those fears. It is not easy to step into reinvention. It is not because everyone expects you to be and show up a certain way.
Right.
So if the folks who are listening and watching and viewing are still a bit hindered, you know, by that, like taking that first step, you know, what kind of advice or just encouragement could you give them around knowing that there's crossing over to the other side is going to be much better than staying stuck?
One thing is break it down step by step. You don't have to do it all in one fall leap. Yeah. But then also find your tribe. I think that's very important because sometimes we want our family and our close friends to be supportive of all of these things. God didn't give you the vision just for you to just try to disseminate it to other folks and get approval for it. Sometimes you just got to step out there and find other people to support it.
It's a little solo journey, but you find your folks along the way.
Yeah, and then your folks that you find may not be the people that you thought would be it, and being okay with that. But then also just being able to, I'm a big proponent of writing things down. Yeah. That's because of the fact that you need to get it out of your head. And then also as you get it out of your head, you can break it down a little bit more. But then also when you look at it, what are you really scared about? Yeah. What about your past is making you scared of your
comfort
future?
Zone? Yeah.
But is it really comfort? Because if it's something that's weighing on you so much, you're not comfortable.
You're not comfortable. It's time to move.
Right.
Yeah. Time to do something different.
Right.
Yeah.
But then, accepting that aspect of it. Don't let fear stagnate you.
Yeah. Love that. As always, thank you for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, but also for being completely unafraid to sometimes be afraid and to do it anyway. Because it is.
I do be afraid at times.
Of course. Of course we all are. Yeah. But I think that so much of your story and your journey has given a sense of freedom to other people. And I'm sure that every single person that follows you, that follows your work, that participates in your work, is grateful in so many ways. So it's just such an amazing journey to watch you continue to climb.
Especially since you've seen it start off. Like,
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Same though. Shooting in the gym.
Right.
That's like my only sports reference I know. Shooting in the gym.
You were literally shooting in the gym.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the road to reinvent, Rwenshaun. Always grateful for you.
Thank you.